Hey everybody, welcome to another edition of Established Run's NBA Injury Report Analysis Show. I'm Drew Dinkmeyer here alongside Mike Gallagher for a 5-game slate here on Thursday, December 2nd. And this is going to be one of our quieter slates from an injury perspective, at least so far. We'll see. The NBA always brings twists and turns as the day goes on. Mike, how are you doing on this Thursday afternoon?
Yeah, relaxed day. Got the beach. Wiggins finally sent me a green screen, so you guys don't have to mock me for my crappy backgrounds anymore. Can't beat the
What are you
beach.
talking about green screen? It looks, I mean, that palm, it almost looked like it might have moved.
Yeah.
It looked like you're right out on the beach.
Go. Yeah, so we're doing good. Yeah, let's hop in this thing.
Yeah, all right. So let's start. I think the big injury news on the slate in terms of guys that are normally in but are not in tonight is going to be Devin Booker. Phoenix, I think, is an interesting spot to tackle generally from a DFS perspective tonight because they're huge home favorites against Detroit. They're on the front end of a back-to-back, and tomorrow night's at Golden State. So you got to figure that, if they can put this one away early, the starters' minutes are going to be managed to some level. Now, to what level is a big question because you look at that last game, and we had Devin Booker for the first half, and then the second half, CP3 played 20 plus second half minutes. Mikal Bridges played 20 plus second half minutes. Cam Johnson played about 14 and a half, but did not play any of the final 5 as they went with a different lineup combination to kind of close things out. So the Suns are not, they've been so healthy the last few years that I think we don't really know how deep they are. And they're actually a little bit less deep than normal just because Abdel Nader is out as well. So losing Booker, who they have to fill a bunch of minutes. And then also you noted that they said Cam Payne was not feeling well before last game. He wasn't on the injury report. He's not on the injury report today. But he also wasn't feeling very well, and his minutes didn't tick up with the absence of Booker, which they have in the past a little bit. So how do you think the Suns handle things tonight, and what do you think the range of minutes on these Suns guys are in terms of what, if we see a blowout or if we see a competitive game? Because trying to come up with minutes projections for the Suns after they played so tight in the absence of Booker and now are in, double-digit favorite spot on the front end of back-to-back was really hard today.
Yeah, and then you factor in who they're playing tomorrow too. So that high-end stuff should be gone. Monty Williams talked about Chris Paul playing 39 minutes and really taking on such a huge load in that spot. I don't think. Monty said he wants to keep him at 30 minutes most nights. So, I mean, the high end of Chris Paul's probably like 33, and that's like high. So,
okay,
we probably want to bring him to like 29 and then just up campaign.
So then we're going to have to pull his minutes down because the challenge is, like, I understand what Monty's saying.
Yeah.
But he's a liar because
True.
because Chris Paul is averaging 32 and a half minutes a game this year. So wanting to keep him around 30, like, you're not doing that.
Right,
so,
yeah.
So the challenge is, like, looking at the range of things. Like, they beat the pants off the Knicks in New York by 20, and CP3 played 30 in that game.
Yeah.
So, like, the lowest he's played this year is 26 in a 29-point loss to Portland, and he only has 2 other games below 30.
Yeah.
He played 29 against the Lakers. He played 28 in a 30-point win against Memphis, and he played 30 in a 26-point win against Houston. Those are, like, the lowest he's played.
Yeah, so maybe 31, I guess, 32.
Okay.
But I think they're going to want to – I don't think there's any chance they play like this crazy amount with the 39-minute joint with Warriors tomorrow. But, I think – well, we don't really know about campaign. Like you said, they didn't list him at all. Monty said he woke up feeling ill on Tuesday and wasn't himself. So that probably explains why the minutes were down. But, we don't know. I mean, some of these guys are 6 for a week. I mean, look at these Wolves guys. They've been kind of listed injury report for – 5-6 days. So maybe he pops up with an injury report. We'll see. But either way, they're probably not going to list him. But, that gets interesting. That's why you and I were talking. I was thinking like Elfrid Payton is probably a decent bet for minutes today over the Chandler Hutchinsons. And you mentioned Nader's out. And so I think he'll be in the mix. Not that guy you would play. But Cam Johnson certainly is going to be starting. We saw him start the third quarter. Probably play a good amount of minutes. Him and Mikal Bridges. We know Mikal Bridges could handle any load you give him. He hasn't missed a game in his career yet. Maybe JaVale plays a little bit more because they're going to want to be fresh for tomorrow, going to the Bay Area for the big game.
Yeah, and this was the tough thing for me is like same thing with McHale, right? Like, I mean, there's been some blowouts and McHale's played 35, 36 in these blowout wins. So trying to figure out like what the range is tough because he played 41 last game. And so I've got McHale at 35. I've got CP3 at 32. I've got Jay Crowder at 30, I think 29, 30, something like that. And the problem is we don't know, like you said, we think Elf would be kind of next man up and then maybe Jalen Smith and then maybe Hutchison, but we really don't know because they didn't really extend the rotation out last game. Like Elf got a 4-minute stint, but that's really not a sign that he's like clearly the guy. So I'm concerned, like this is the toughest spot to project for me tonight because just based on what they've done, it's hard not to have CP3 and McHale like projecting for into the 30s. And and I have at 31. But like if the other thing that I'd say about this is a couple other like, which all of this would be guessing in terms of getting into the mental mindset of teams, which you really shouldn't do, but just thinking through options and ranges of outcomes. If this game is tight tonight against Detroit, do you think they try to make sure they get this game and then they can rest somebody tomorrow if they wanted to against Golden State and just say like, look, we beat you without Devin Booker in a half. We don't need to give you the satisfaction of beating us with a fuller squad, kind of giving you that confidence level. I don't know. It's just, it's a thought that like, if this game, cause this is such a like trap game for them, just beating Golden State, then getting Detroit at home, like one of the worst teams in the league. And then looking ahead at Golden State tomorrow. It's such a trap game for them that the game could stay tighter longer. And I'm just wondering, like, what do they do in those situations? So I think the ceiling on CP3 is like 35, 36. I think that's like the absolute ceiling. Not the 39, 40, which is why I'm down at like 31, 32 on the minute side. I think the ceiling on McHale is like 38 because we've seen some 36s in some real blowout situations. So I think tight game 38 might be the ceiling. But it's going to force Monty into some uncomfortable lineup combinations. The other way that they could do this is they could just extend the minutes of Cam Johnson, Landry Shamet, Cam Payne. Those guys all get up into the mid-20s. Cam Johnson's going to be in the upper 20s for a starting role, but get Landry Shamet into the upper 20s, get Cam Payne into the mid-20s. That's another way they could take pressure off without extending deeper into the rotation and playing like Elf or Hutchison or Jalen Smith. Right now, we have 22 combined minutes for Elf, Hutchison, and Jalen Smith. So basically like one extra person in a rotation. And we're still at 35 on Bridges, 32 on CP3. You know what I mean? So like it's tough to handle the Phoenix projections today.
Yeah, and to your point, like Golden State's just waiting for them. They don't have any game since they played that game, and it's in San Francisco, so they're just waiting for them. Kerr's already said they're making adjustments for what they're going to do to approach this game too. So, I mean, to your point, like maybe you just hand it to them. So like, okay, we beat you when it mattered. But, So I think you're on it.
Yeah. So it's a tough spot. And man, like this, like from an emotional game perspective, this is trap game written all over it. So I'm nervous on how to project Phoenix tonight. It's one of the tougher spots for me for sure. All right. Other big questionables on the slate. Let's go to the Knicks. Man, the Knicks are another rotation that is a nightmare to project right now because we had this last RJ Barrett game where he played 9 minutes and then couldn't make it anymore. He's questionable on the injury report again tonight. And in the absence of RJ Barrett minutes with Kemba Walker out of the rotation, you saw Derrick Rose activated and immediately plays 35 minutes because Tibbs can't help himself. Quickly up to 38 minutes. Julius Randle 40, Alec Burks 39, Fournier down to 22. We've seen Fournier as high as 40. And so I think we know the guys that they want to play, but I think there's an element of a hot hand situation that makes projecting the minutes on an individual game basis more challenging and volatile. And I think really if they have RJ Barrett, you got to project him for like 30 minutes because you got to project him as if he's healthy. You can't project him as if he's sick and he's going to leave in a quarter. So like, what do we do with this Knicks situation from like a minutes perspective? Because I've got like I've got Rose and Quickly in the mid-20s, but Rose just played 35, Quickly just played 38 and 31. I've got Burks at like 34 and a half. He's just played like 39 back-to-back games. It's a mess.
Yeah, it's insane. Should add that Tibbs said yesterday at practice that Archie Barrett was feeling a little bit better, for whatever that's worth. And again, he got the kind of late tag to the injury report, so that suggests he was kind of getting on the front end of this illness. And like I just said, like we don't know how long these things take. So, maybe he plays, maybe he's, pretty close to full health, but, he should be better than he was, where, less likely to play the, first quarter in bounce or second quarter in bounce, I should say. But yeah, to your point. And then also like the other factor of this is like their starting unit. We know Tibbs likes to keep them together, and he kind of had to break it up because RJ went out. So the continuity of that first unit went out the window anyways. So like the Fournier stuff and, those minutes are all kind of tied together with the way Tibbs separates his first and second unit. So, RJ being healthy and fully and ready to go is good for Fournier. Obviously, good for really Alec Burks. I think is pretty safe regardless. But, Mitch Robinson's also slightly affected by that too, just because he likes to keep their guys together.
Really kind of amazing that with RJ Barrett only playing 9 minutes, Quentin Grimes only got 3. So I think, if RJ Barrett was unable to go tonight, I imagine the starters in that scenario would be Mitch, Julius, Burks, Fournier, and Rose. I assume.
Yeah, I think so.
I think it's Rose or Quickly, right?
Yeah, Rose or Quickly. Yeah, because the reason why they're starting Burks, according to Tibbs, is they don't want to have too many small guards out there, and you're not having really any if you're putting Burks with one of those guys. So
yeah,
I think that makes sense.
Yeah, if Barrett was out, do you think we'd ever see Kemba back, or do you think Kemba's just gone?
I don't think so. I think they got enough people without him.
Okay.
Yeah.
Speaking of tight rotations and craziness in injury Q tags, there's also Gary Trent for Toronto. Trent did not play last game. We have seen in previous games Svi Mikhailuk fill in for Gary Trent and play really heavy minutes. That did not happen last game. You can see the old 16 by Svi. Yuto Watanabe and Malachi Flynn picked up a lot of the playing time last game.
Yeah.
They're going up against Giannis in the Bucks after a big national TV. Actually, it wasn't national TV. It should have been national TV. We should have Giannis and LaMelo on national TV anytime that happens, but it was not. After a big win against Charlotte last night in a close game that extended their starters, they're playing on a back-to-back. And so Gary Trent, are we going to see him back? If so, I think it's a lot easier to project Toronto. If not, man, these secondary players, the minutes variance in them is so wide, and it's very frustrating.
Yeah, he went through practice from a calf contusion, so it's not a strain. So he should be out there. We'll see. Probably maybe not totally full, but we know totally full Toronto is like 45. So yeah I think he'll be out there. That'll cut down a lot of guys. Worth noting that Delano Banton and Bonga were sent down to the G League, but they're expected to come back up for this game. So, take that for what it's worth. Maybe don't want to push him too hard there. But, Watanabe really picked up a lot of the front court minutes with, against Steven Adams and Jaren Jackson Jr. and those guys. So he's pretty secure. They trust him over Boucher. Boucher is completely dusted right now. Well, not completely, I should say, but pretty close to. But, definitely Svi's going to go away. Fred VanVleet, 42 minutes. Like I said, the last time we talked about them, Nurse was talking about playing him 40 minutes. He's like, oh, no, we went him around 37, 38. Like, okay. And then he goes and plays him 42.
Yeah.
So, VanVleet's minutes are insane. Scotty Barnes is insane with playing time as well.
Yeah. And I even with Gary Trent projected in, have Watanabe up around like 18 and a half, 19. Just thinking, like, we have Boucher for a handful, not very many there. We have Svi down. But I think if you have Gary Trent in, now the reserve that Nick Nurse has the most confidence in is Watanabe.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he loves him.
Scenario. So
he was chucking too, man. He was taking like off-balance threes, and Nurse didn't really have a problem with it in his presser. So I guess Watanabe is here to stay.
So I think he could start if Gary Trent was out. I think they probably keep Svi in that spot.
Yeah, I think he likes him off the bench. I don't think he would start.
Yeah, I think it, but I could see scenarios where they do. Just saying.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Okay,
matchup makes sense.
Norm Powell and the Trailblazers. Norm is questionable again. We know there's no Dame for a little while here.
Mm-hmm.
The minutes in that game were a little bit skewed by a blowout towards the end. So they lost a little bit of playing time towards the end. You saw massive workloads for Simons and McCollum, obviously. What was interesting in that game when they tried to fill Norm Powell, obviously Snell started and he played really good minutes. Covington played 18 first half minutes and then played 1 6-minute rotation in the second half and was gone. It was just dusted. And they played, Macklemore got hot, so they kind of ran with that. DSJ did not play as much as we thought he was going to. And they ended up kind of playing, honestly, like a little bit bigger.
Yeah.
They played, basically you can see there between Nurk, Zeller, and Nance, right? They played basically like 20 minutes of Nance at the 4. And only like 4 minutes at the 5. So they basically decided to move Rocco to the 3 a little bit, play him a little bit there, and have Macklemore and those guys at the 3. So you think Powell comes back tonight? And if not, do you think we see a similar rotation to what we saw last game? It's a different matchup this time with San Antonio.
Yeah, we got him in. A lot of contusions this week. KPJ is going to miss time with his third thigh contusion. But I think he's in there. Roka's minutes certainly, not nearly the same amount of upside. I mentioned the minutes of the 3, and DSJ will get some combo guard minutes. Ben McLemore really got talked about after the game by Chauncey Billups, so his minutes I think should be pretty safe. Not that you're going to be playing him. And it was interesting that this game they had this game in hand, middle in the 4th, and Billups, luckily for me, I had an over on McCollum. I needed like one more point, and he put him back in, and got me there. But he didn't need to. They could have definitely sat on that lead in most cases. But he clearly is going to play those guys a ton. And Simons, McCollum, Nick Nurk's minutes, not in a back-to-back either. That really helps him too. So he could really get up there. And then Nance I think should secure a pretty good amount of backup minutes, and hopefully rubbing to Covington gets a little bit more. And he was kind of like not affected in that. So I think if it was a closer game, his minutes would be up a little bit more.
Yeah. It was a weird kind of second half rotation for Covington on the whole in that one. But that can happen with him. Like he's a very replaceable player in the rotation if he's not making shots, which 3 for 10, he was not making shots.
Yeah. Well, Little's big though too, because they close with Little over him a lot. So his minutes should be pretty safe.
Yeah. All right. They're playing the Spurs. The Spurs are getting back Doug McDermott and Devin Vassell tonight. Both are listed as probable on the injury report. It's difficult to project, a little bit difficult to project the minutes for the Spurs, just because right before those guys, before both of them were out, they had McDermott hurt, but Vassell healthy, and Keita Bates-Diop was starting in those spots. But before that, he wasn't in the rotation. And it's hard to project a guy from starting to completely out of the rotation until you see the starters.
Yeah.
So we have some minutes for Keita Bates-Diop right now. That could potentially move around a little bit. But basically, like, I think having these guys back, I think the big thing that it does, unfortunately, is it cuts away at the ceiling of DeJounte Murray, Derek White, Keldon Johnson. I think just having the more depth on these guys makes it so that those games that we've seen of late, where it's been like 38 minutes for Derek White, 40 for DeJounte, 38 for Keldon, I don't know that those are there with these two guys back. I think they might be more like DeJounte can still get 36, 37, I think. White might be more like 34, 33 on the high side, and Keldon might be around that same level instead of the 38. Is that your takeaway for bringing Vassell and McDermott back in?
Yeah, and you could see here too. I mean, they went deep into this rotation without those guys, and Pop said that he kind of wanted to do that to get everyone involved. And apparently, he does not like it when you call like someone called him Josh Primo, and like Pop snapped at him. It was kind of funny. It's like his name's Joshua. But so I think Bates-Diop's gone. At least from the starting role. Doug McDermott started all 12 of his games. No reason to think he doesn't start, but then again, he hasn't really been great. He's on a short leash. Devin Vassell, they like him off the bench, certainly. So I would think they start him. And it should be a little bit more concentrated with a little bit more of a clear rotation after this one. But yeah, certainly the key guys should be pretty safe. And Keldon, I think it's a good spot for Keldon. You don't have to worry about exercise at the 4. So I think Keldon's minutes are pretty safe, even with a lot of competition coming into the mix.
What do you think the range on his minutes are tonight?
Yeah, so
he
like
was
the
one of
bad
the
side
guys
would
that was
be,
giving me a problem.
assuming like no extreme foul trouble, probably say like 26 is like everything's going bad to like 34. So we're kind of right there.
Okay. Yeah. Then we're in range. Okay, cool.
Yeah.
That's kind of what I was thinking, because we have seen like the unusual like 22s and 23s from Keldon, but we've seen some unusual like 37s and 38s too. So like the range is really, really wide with him. But I think
there's a lot of ways you can cut him down. I mean, there's a lot of, he gets cut down in a variety of ways. We've seen Lonnie cut him down, Vassell cut him down, Bates Diop cut him down. A lot of people could cut him down. So there's a lot of passing failing.
And you've mentioned before, like when they play from behind, sometimes they're looking at lineups that have more shooting and more guard heavy lineups. And against Portland's going to be very fine with that. They're going to be happy to run out more guards than they are bigs. So would just note that I think there are, there's just generally some risk with Keldon because he's a volatile minutes type player. All right, the Bulls back to life without Kobe White. Tested positive for coronavirus. So we're going to miss him for a little bit of time. And what we saw from the Bulls pre-Kobe White's return was just super tight rotations. I mean, they just did not have a lot of confidence in the bench. This is the last game Kobe White did not play? Yeah. No, Kobe White did play.
He did play. This is the last game, yeah.
So, yeah, I mean, I think you see Caruso probably get up to 30 again off a bench roll. I think you see increased minutes upside for Levine and DeRozan. Vooch a little bit. I think, Javonte Green, Io gets back into the mix a little bit. Maybe Troy Brown or Matt Thomas could get some spare minutes, but the Bulls were willing to play really, really tight without Kobe White before. And I think we might get back to that again.
Yeah, I mean, you're still pretty solid 8-man rotation right there. And then, like you said, maybe Peace and a little bit of Troy, maybe Peace and some Tony Bradley, but I think they're comfortable playing Derrick Jones Jr. at the 5 across from what would probably be Nerlens Noel in those minutes. I think that's okay. Noel doesn't really back you down post-Olympics, et cetera, so I think that's fine. So, yeah, like you said, I feel like without Kobe, we got a pretty good sample. I just want to add that Billy Donovan really talked about posting up Vooch a lot this game. So it's something to consider. I'm sure you and I will be talking about that on the DFS show later. Got like a frog in my throat, excuse me. It's one of these frogs jumped in my mouth or something here, so I'm doing
You've got the frogs. I've got the sirens closing in, as is typical in a New York City afternoon.
Right.
All right. Kyle Anderson, last injury to tackle. He's questionable on the injury report from Memphis tonight. And I actually think this is low-key kind of an important one. Because Memphis without John Morant, obviously, they're a little bit thinner naturally, and they're playing Oklahoma City. And man, Memphis is weathering this Ja out storm really well. They got a nice win last time out. They've won 2 in a row now. Now they get Oklahoma City on the second night of back-to-back. But we've seen Brandon Clark has played really, really well of late. And I think if Kyle Anderson did not play, there's a few more paths to his minutes being a little bit more secure. And he's pretty cheap generally. So he's pretty interesting to me. But if Kyle Anderson can't go, what do you think their rotations look like? We saw some Santi Aldama last game, which was surprising. That's not something we had seen before, but they stuck to the 10-man, they like to stick to 10. So how do you think they'd replace Kyle if you were unable to go tonight?
I think they'd have to go 9, right? And it's worth noting he had a couple real short subs, so that explains it because it wasn't really foul. So I guess he was hurt in the first quarter. He had a real quick hook, and then came back in and was kind of levering through it. So it's a legit injury. I dug in. He had this injury in 2018, so a while ago. With the way he moves, you think he has every day, but so I think Aldama would be in the mix again, and then boost up Conchar a little bit more. Melton would be playing a lot more. He'd be a sneaky beneficiary because you're going to be filling those minutes at the 3 more with Bane rather than Bane being more of a 1-2. It'd be more of a 1-2-3. So I think he would be a real sneaky beneficiary from this one.
Yeah, I think basically you would see kind of I don't think they can play the starters much more than they did this last game with Toronto in terms of like where they're comfortable with the numbers, right? Like 34s for them are on the higher end for Memphis rotations. So I think you just see kind of those 19 minutes from Kyle Anderson distribute among these reserves. The one thing that they could do, they could keep a 10th man in the rotation by playing Xavier Tillman and having Tillman be the backup center. Just a short rotation, like 8 minutes, two rotations of 4 minutes or something like that. Have him behind Adams, have Jaren Jackson, split the 4 and the 5, and then have Brandon Clark as a 4, or, depending on how you look at that, Brandon Clark split the 4 and the 5 and Jaren Jackson pure 4. But I think without Kyle Anderson, what they can't do is they can't slide wings to the 4. They don't have the way to do that. They got to cover those minutes with bigs. So I think the ceiling increases for Jaren Jackson. It increases for Brandon Clark. It increases for Steven Adams. And I think there's a chance that Xavier Tillman would get into the rotation in that scenario. And I think because now you have all these guys up, the rest of the guys that are 1 through 3, right? You've got Tyus and Melton kind of handling the 1, essentially. You've got Brooks and Konkar kind of handling the 2. And then you've got Bane and Aldama kind of handling the 3, right? Like that's kind of how that will all work. And so naturally, it just increases the ceiling of all the bigs minutes, I think, because it's harder to play small. Now, against Oklahoma City, you can play lots of different ways, and like the game can get out of hand and all these different things. But I think it's a good spot. Like if Kyle Anderson sits, I think it's a sneaky spot to attack Memphis tonight. And really some of their bench players, honestly, like Melton and Clark would be guys that I'd be looking to potentially attack in GPPs.
Yeah, definitely. And it was quick. Aldama was straight in the Zaire Williams substitution pattern. Yeah. It was pretty crazy that was the plan.
Yeah, and Zaire's doubtful. That's the thing we forgot to mention as well there. So we're not expecting Zaire to play. But if you remove Zaire and Kyle, they just don't have threes that can really play the 4 in normal situations. Sometimes you get really small ball, crazy lineups that'll allow these things. But I also think the strength of their roster would be leaning into those bigger lines as well. So.
And it helps Adams a little bit too, if they're going to be using Jaren Jackson more as a 4, then
for sure. And we'll see if Jaren can stay out of foul trouble. That's the thing. Like his minutes can always be limited at any point. But Brandon Clark, I think it was either this game or the game before. I was looking over minutes distributions, and he played like 16 second half minutes, like 14 to 16 second half minutes, something like crazy. He barely played in the first half. I think it was the Toronto game, where he barely played in the first half, and they played a huge rotation in the second half. And we've seen those games against Toronto and Utah, right, where the minutes got up there. So I think he's pretty interesting in this spot against Oklahoma City if Kyle Anderson can't go.
Yep, definitely. Just with OKC, really quick, they haven't filed yet, but we know Giddey's out. We know Favors is out. Muscala is probably going to be questionable game time after the ankle soreness too. So should be pretty clear with the rotation. We'll probably see Trey Mann out there again. Clear as far as
OKC. You guys. This was Gary on the show last night telling me he feels pretty secure on Roby's minutes. I'm like, guys, like it's the Oklahoma City Thunder. We have no idea what they're going to do on any given night. So theoretically clear for them is like is as foggy as can be in my world of comparing to the rest.
Well, it is a road game too. We'll see if their G League guys came with them. Sometimes they'll keep the Oklahoma City Blue guys behind. Yeah. So that could really clarify.
Yeah,
we'll have information when we get minutes later.
You look at their minutes last night, and you see like upper 30s for Shea and Dort and JRE, and then you see Bazley at 25, and you're like, why is Bazley down at 25 if these other guys are in the 30s? And then you see like JRE getting into the mid 30s when Roby played really well in his limited minutes, and Poku was effective in his minutes, and they just got cut down completely. And then they lose to Houston without Kevin Porter Jr. and Christian Wood. And so it's just like, they're just a nightmare to me. I would prefer they get relegated, but that's unfortunately not an American concept. So yeah, I think projecting them is going to be very difficult tonight, and I could easily see them pulling their foot off the gas on the second night of a back-to-back with like Dort and SGA and JRE.
Yeah, I think there's a possibility that one of those guys is out for sure.
Oh my God,
to see
if something like that happens, projecting them is going to be such a nightmare. But yeah, Trey Mann, they're getting their extended look. 32 minutes last night, and it resulted in what is that? 10 fantasy points, something like that. So. Not so great.
High volume. He likes to shoot it, and he can't do much else besides that. So
yeah, not so great. Okay. Any other injury situations we need to tackle? I think that's it. Did anything pop while we were on the show? Sometimes that happens.
No, Killian's all good with that thumb thing.
Okay.
I think we're all clear for most of the stuff. There's some other little probable tags. We talked about Zaire, and I think we got it.
All right, great. If you are a subscriber to Established Run's NBA premium content, you will find myself and Mike Gallagher behind the paywall 5:30 on Establish the Show. If you're not a subscriber, please at least consider, liking the video, subscribing to the YouTube page, getting the notifications that can keep you updated when we're providing this free content. We will be back again tomorrow, 2:00 Eastern time. Justin Fan joining the show once again for his usual Friday spot from Underdog Fantasy. Make sure to follow those guys. Best news team in the business in terms of getting information out there over at Underdog.
OKC's injury report just came out.
Oh, no.
Let's see. It looks like Muscala's off of it.
Okay.
I think that's it.
Okay. Cool. Disaster does not strike yet.
Yep, I was right. No G League guys. No Vit, no Maladon, no Wiggins. So, it's clear. It's clear.
You have to make some projection adjustments because Wiggins and Maladon were definitely
your favorite thing to do.
So
do you like does Leone like yard work more, or do you like OKC projections more? I think it's pretty close.
I would say that Leone probably likes yard work a little bit less than I like OKC projections because he's not doing any yard work and I'm still stuck doing these. So clearly I must like them more. But with that note, we'll leave you guys. We'll be back again tomorrow at 2:00 Eastern. Best of luck in all your games tonight. See you behind the paywall at 5:30 Eastern with Establish the Show. Take care, guys.